The attic smelled of dust and old wood, the kind of scent that clings to winters and keeps the summers carefully folded away. Light came in through a small window, thick with cobwebs, and turned the floating dust into slow snow. Arthur took each step carefully. At 90, careful was how he lived now, hands on the rail, eyes where he placed his feet, breath steady like someone counting blessings. "Grandpa, do you want me to carry the box?" Lucy called from the bottom of the stairs. She was 20 and kind, and he loved that her voice always carried a smile. "I've got this one," he said, tapping a thin cardboard lid with the back of his fingers. The box was no bigger than a loaf of bread. A faded ribbon crossed it once, then twice. In the corner, written in a neat hand, was one word, letters. He set the box on a trunk that had traveled with him before Lucy's mother was born. He sat. The attic wood was cool through his trousers. He waited a moment, listening to the house breathe, the old pipes, the old clock downstairs, the wind teasing the window. So much of his life had been carried in small sounds like these. Evelyn had kept her things neatly. That was one of the first things he'd noticed about her when they met. Not the neatness itself, but the way she cared for the world. She would straighten a picture in a stranger's hallway. She would fold a scarf someone dropped at the church door and set it on the bench so whoever lost it would feel seen. She had that kind of tenderness that doesn't ask to be noticed. Arthur had not opened this box in years. Not since she left, soft as a lamp turning out. People say time heals. He had learned that time doesn't heal so much as it lays a warm hand on the aching place and sits with you a while. Grief had made a room in him, and he had learned to keep it tidy, like she would have wanted. He slid the ribbon free. Lifted the lid. Old paper has its own kind of light, he thought. It glows from the years it has carried. On top lay an envelope with his name written in the shape of her, as if the letters stood with their shoulders back. A date in the corner. The first one. "Do you want some tea?" Lucy's head appeared at the hatch, hair caught in the dusty light. "In a minute," he said, and he smiled so she would know he meant it. He wanted to be alone with the past for a while. He wanted to see if the wind still sounded like the same wind. He turned the envelope over and ran his finger beneath the seal. It gave easily, like a door that still knows the hand that built it. Before he read, he closed his eyes, because memory is easier to hear when you aren't looking at anything. He saw her in a blue dress on a summer porch, sitting with her knees close together, laughing at something he had said which was probably not very funny. He saw her in the grocery, holding a bag of apples to her cheek because they were cool and she liked small comforts. He saw her in their kitchen, 40 years later, pressing a napkin flat with the heel of her hand while the kettle sang. The attic felt close, the way it did on days when rain was coming. Arthur took the letter out, careful as if he were lifting a sleeping bird. The paper had thinned along its creases. He smoothed it over his knee. Something sweet drifted up, faint perfume, or maybe the ghost of lavender soap. He read the first line with his mouth shaping the words, as if she were inside his breath. "Dear Arthur," it said, and he felt the years inside those two words, a whole house full of rooms. He didn't read further yet. He looked instead at the way she crossed her T's, at the margin where she had pressed too hard and left a tiny tear. He saw her at a small wooden desk by the window of her parents' house, hair pulled back, pencil tucked behind her ear, tongue tucked against her lip the way she did when she wanted to get something right. He heard the old bus rattling by. He heard his mother in the backyard, hanging sheets. He heard the church bell telling everyone else what time it was, while time sat with him and waited. He remembered, as he sat there with the first letter again, the first thing love had taught him all those years ago, that love begins in ordinary places, on porches, in grocery aisles, on sidewalks where someone stops to tie a child's shoe. Big words and promises are fine, but love lives in the small, daily sight of each other. It lives in the way a hand reaches for another without thinking. He took a breath that made his ribs feel like an old gate opening and began to read. Outside, the wind found the last leaves clinging to the maple. The house sighed. The attic settled. Arthur leaned closer to the page, to the girl who was already the woman he would love, and to the boy he had once been, who didn't know yet how much of life could fit inside an envelope. He read the next line. Then the next. The paper made a soft sound as it lifted and fell between his fingers. And in that quiet, with dust turning to light, he stepped back into the door where their days began. He did not know, not yet, what waited at the bottom of the page. He only knew the way her voice moved along the lines, steady, brave, not quite 20, learning, even then, to say what mattered. He reached for the edge of the paper like someone reaching for a hand he had never stopped holding, and the attic, which had been full of forgotten things, began to feel like a room opening its windows for the first time in a very long time. Dear Arthur, the letter said again, this time as if she had said his name twice to be sure he was listening. If your days are long, I hope this makes them shorter. If they are short, I hope this makes them bright. He could hear her. The words carried her voice the way a shell carries the sea. She told him about the ordinary that made up her days while he was away doing the work life had set before him. Mrs. Parker's cat had finally had kittens on the back step, she wrote, and the youngest had a little white sock on his left paw. The roses by the porch had decided to be stubborn this year and refused to open until after the first rain. She had tried a new bread recipe and it came out lopsided, and her father ate the crooked half with butter and said it tasted just right. Then her pen slowed. I am sorry about last week, she wrote. Arthur felt his chest go quiet. It was silly to be proud when you were only tired. If I could, I would go back and listen longer. Next time, I will. He remembered the argument. It wasn't big. They almost never were. He had been leaving the next morning. He had wanted to be brave and ended up being stubborn instead. She had crossed her arms and tried not to cry, and then he had kissed her hair and said nothing in particular, because when you are young you think you must hold everything in your mouth to keep it from spilling out. They hadn't had the skill yet to say, I'm scared. Please sit with me. So the night had ended too quickly, and morning had come, and the bus had taken him away, and now here she was, putting a hand out across the distance. He felt the second thing love had taught him press its warm weight against him. Love learns to say I'm sorry before the silence grows roots. It is not about winning. It is about returning. She wrote about the church bazaar and how the children had taken all the cinnamon cookies before anyone remembered to save some for the volunteers. She wrote, Do you still whistle when you walk? I sit by the window and try to hear it. He smiled. He had not whistled in years. That small habit had slipped away somewhere between one mortgage and the next. He had no idea until he read her question that he missed it. I have decided to wait, she wrote then, and the line stood simple and tall. Not because waiting makes me noble, but because waiting is how I keep walking beside you even when the road is not the same. He put the letter in his lap and let his hands fall open. The room adjusted itself. He could smell the faintest hint of the soap she used to love, the one in the green bottle with the chipped cap. He remembered another lesson, the third, coming like a steady lamplight. Love keeps its promises in small ways. It shows up in folded laundry and warm soup and shoes by the door. It shows up in a chair pulled closer when the knees begin to ache. It shows up in letters, sent and saved. He read more. Her handwriting shifted in places, as if she had gotten up to stir a pot or answer the door and then come back, breath still warm from the world. Today the rain came early, she wrote, and the roof sounded like someone drumming their fingers to remind me to be patient. She put a tiny star in the margin next to the word patient. He could see her laughing at herself then, a little bashful, a little proud. At the bottom of the page, a small pressed clover had left the faintest green shadow, like a memory of itself. And beneath that, a sentence that stopped and stood on the edge of itself, if you come back by spring, I. The line trailed into a little curve. The pencil had lifted. A thought had been interrupted. Maybe the phone had rung. Maybe her father had called from the garden. Maybe she had decided that some words are best spoken into a face, not into a page. He touched the unfinished sentence and felt the way time sometimes leaves a promise open for years until one day it lets you walk right into it. He turned the page to see if it continued, but there was only a little doodle she always drew when her mind wandered, a tiny house with a chimney and a curl of smoke. In the corner, very small, she had written, "P.S. Wear your sweater even if you think you don't need it." He laughed, and the laughter surprised him, the sound of it like a window opening. There it was, the fourth lesson, gentle and stubborn as ever. Love cares about the little things because it has learned that little things gather into years. A sweater. A reminder. A clover pressed for luck. The way she tucked an extra apple into his bag the day he left and pretended she didn't. He sat back, letter on his knees, eyes on the dusty window. Somewhere in the yard below, a jay cried out. A truck rolled down the street and faded. He let his mind go hunting for that spring, the one she had named and left waiting. He could feel it. The wind had been cool and full of new grass. The backyard had been soft, and his mother had planted peas along the fence. He tried to remember what they had done when he came back, and where they had gone, and whether she had finished that sentence in the shade of the big maple or at the kitchen table with the blue cloth. The attic door frame gave a small groan as the house settled. Arthur folded the letter and held it between both palms like a prayer. The unfinished words were not a question to be solved, he realized. They were a doorway. He closed his eyes and stepped through, back into a spring that had waited patiently for him to remember. Rain began while he was thinking about it, as if the past had decided to lean forward and touch the present. It came soft at first, then steadier, turning the attic window into a sheet of silver. He listened. Rain had always sounded the same in every year of his life, a steady hand saying, "I'm here. Take your time." He remembered the day the bus brought him home. He had not arrived by spring. He was a week late. The road had flooded 2 towns over. He found her waiting on the bridge anyway, under an umbrella that was far too small for 2 people but perfect for 2 foreheads pressed together. She had no scolding in her mouth. Only this, "You came." He said, "I'm sorry," and she shook her head. "You came," she said again, and that was enough. They walked home in the rain. At her parents' gate, she kissed him once and then again, as if starting over is done in little steps like crossing a stream on stones. He remembered then what the unfinished sentence had been, because she whispered it in that exact spot, rain in her eyelashes, "If you come back by spring, I'll plant us a magnolia." He could see it now, what the years had asked him to forget and was now giving back. They had bought a small sapling from a man with a truck who told them magnolias take patience, but when they bloom, it's as if the tree has been keeping a secret and is finally ready to tell it. They had planted it by the fence. He had dug, she had set the roots straight with her careful hands. Every spring after, when the white flowers opened, she would put one in a bowl of water on the kitchen table and everything in the room would feel a little lighter, like the air itself had remembered something kind. He stood, feeling the old wish in his knees to go check the tree. He took the stairs slowly. Lucy looked up from the kitchen table when he came down, a tea towel in her hands. "You all right?" she asked. "I'm going to the yard," he said, "to see if something is still there." He opened the back door. Rain tapped the porch rail and tickled his face. The magnolia, now taller than the fence, held its leaves like 100 small hands open to the sky. It was not spring, but he could see the places where the buds would be when the cold was finished. He reached out and touched the bark. The tree was cool and alive. He felt foolish and holy all at once. He thought of the 5th lesson, the one that had taken the longest to name because it doesn't show itself all at once. Love changes shape, but it does not end. It turns from a promise into a practice. It turns from a shared bed into the way you keep the other person's favorite mug on the low shelf where they used to reach. It turns from conversation into memory, and memory, if you are gentle, into a living place you can go to without getting lost. He remembered other truths that rippled out from this one like circles in a pond. The years had not been easy every day. They had argued about money and about schedules and about the right way to fold fitted sheets. They had gotten lost once on a road trip and found a diner with a pie that made them forgive each other. They had held hands in hospital rooms. They had laughed in grocery lines. Forgiveness had not been a single decision. It had been a habit, like brushing teeth, like locking the door, like choosing each other again at the end of ordinary days. He went back inside, damp at the collar. Lucy poured him tea without asking. He sat and laid the letter next to the cup, careful that the steam didn't curl the edges. He told her about the magnolia, about the unfinished sentence, and about the man with the truck who sold them a promise disguised as a tree. "Can I see the letter?" she asked. "Not this one," he said softly. "Not yet." He touched the envelope with 2 fingers, almost a bow. "But I'll tell you what it says." He told her the simple parts, the small news, the clover, the sweater. He told her how he could hear her voice in the way the words were tied together and where they stopped to breathe. He did not tell her about the apology, that one he kept, warm, in his own pocket. Some kindnesses grow best when they aren't handled too much. The rain loosened. The house listened. He felt something settle inside his chest, like a book being set back on its shelf in the right place. He had not realized until this moment that he had been carrying a question for years: have I remembered her right? Not the facts, those he could put on a timeline. But the feel of her, the way love had made a home in him shaped like her laughter. The letter had answered him without scolding. It had said, "Here I am. Here you are. The rest is just the road between." That night he put the envelope on his bedside table. He left the lamp on a little longer than usual, listening to the rain and the old clock in the quiet. He did not feel young. He did not want to. He felt the age he was, and it was good to be that age with a letter on the table and a tree outside remembering spring. Before he slept, he took a small card from the drawer and a pencil with a worn eraser. He wrote a line and stopped and smiled, because he was finishing something he could not, for years, find words for. On the card, in his careful hand, he wrote, "If you come back by spring, I'll be here, under the magnolia." He slid the card into the envelope with her letter, 2 halves of a sentence finally sitting side by side. Morning came clear. The storm had washed the sky and left the world looking scrubbed. Light moved across the floor like slow water. Arthur sat in his armchair with a blanket over his knees and the box of letters at his side, unopened. He didn't feel the rush to read them all. The first one was enough for now. It had done what first things do when they are true: they open doors gently and let you decide whether to walk through. He thought about the 5 things the letter had returned to him, not as a list, but as a handful of small stones he liked the weight of. Love begins in ordinary places, he thought, and the memory that came with it was a porch with peeling paint and a girl with a blue dress and a laugh that kept him from being too serious. Love learns to say "I'm sorry" and mean it, and the memory was a kitchen where 2 people stood too close to reach for pride. Love keeps its promises in small ways: chairs pulled closer, sweaters remembered, clovers pressed for luck. Love cares about little things because it knows little things become years. And love changes shape but does not end. It becomes the tree that blooms when you think winter has decided to stay. He held these thoughts the way you hold a book you finished and loved. You don't close it too quickly. You let your hand rest on the cover and thank it. Lucy came in and sat on the rug at his feet like she used to when she was small. "What will you do with the letters?" she asked. "I'll read them," he said. "Slowly. Not all at once. There's no hurry where they came from." She nodded. "Can I sit with you when you do?" "Sometimes," he said, smiling. "Sometimes I must sit with them alone. But I will tell you the parts that want to be told." They were quiet a while. He could hear the neighbor raking. He could hear the kettle beginning to think about boiling. He could hear, from somewhere far off and inside him, a whistle. He tried it. The tune came back like a bird that had not forgotten the way home. Lucy looked up, surprised, and then clapped her hands. "Do that again." He whistled the simple tune Evelyn had teased him about when they were 20. He whistled it softly, so it did not break. When the tea was ready, he poured it himself, steady hands, the way he had poured it for her when her hands had grown a little unsteady at the end. He set an extra cup on the table. Not because of ghosts. Just because it felt right to pour for 2. The steam curled up. The house felt warm in the places where time tapes itself to the walls. He didn't summarize the years in his head. He let them move through him like light through leaves. He thought about the small ways love had asked things of him and the small ways he had answered. Washing the dishes without being asked when she had a headache. Learning her mother's recipe for chicken and dumplings. Leaving a note in her coat pocket on cold mornings. Listening the second time when the first time he was too proud. He thought about the last day, which had not been loud but had been full. He had sat beside her and read to her from the book she had made him read twice when they were young. He had said her name often. He had told the nurse she liked her tea not too strong. When her hand had loosened in his, he had said thank you out loud, because gratitude wanted to be spoken and not swallowed. The room had been very quiet then, and then it had gone quieter still. He did not put this part into words now. He let it stay a feeling in the room while the kettle clicked and the wind moved the magnolia leaves. He felt no need to be brave. He felt no need to be anything but present. He reached for the envelope on the table and, before he put it back in the box, he pressed his fingers to the paper. I heard you, he said. I hear you. It wasn't that he wanted to bring the past back. He wanted, instead, to keep faith with the parts of himself that had been shaped by her, the parts that were gentle, patient, listening. He placed the box in the drawer, not hidden, just home. He looked at Lucy and saw the way the light on her face looked like a morning he remembered, and he felt the peaceful kind of tired you get when you have done the day's good work by noon. If this story touched your heart, he said softly, as if he were speaking to the room and whoever might be sitting in it, subscribe for more forgotten letters and timeless memories. He let the words rest. Then, after a small quiet, he added the kind of question that opens a circle instead of closing it. Have you ever found something from the past that changed how you saw life? He didn't say it to stir up old pain. He said it like someone setting a chair out on the porch for a neighbor who might want to sit a while. Share your story in the comments, he said, a small smile in his voice. Your words might comfort someone else. He sat back. The house breathed. The magnolia waited without hurry for spring to come again. The letter lay where it belonged. And Arthur, who had spent 90 years learning how to love and how to remember, felt that rare and quiet peace that comes when a sentence finally finds its ending and leaves behind the gentle rustle of paper and the steady sound of rain no longer falling. Thank you for listening with such a kind heart. Please like the video, subscribe, and until we meet again.